but we want to go on and get started with this session. I am Wondra Ashley Williams. I am not Pamela, as you saw in your program. Unfortunately, we've had some illnesses. Pamela is out sick, and we had another panelist, Leslie King. She is sick as well and couldn't make it today. So you're with us, Bill and myself, and we're going to give you as much information as we can, and you will have an opportunity to ask questions and share whatever you would like to share with us as well. Okay? So this is this session is about climate action plans that we need to always have an EJ lens when we are developing these plans and when we are implementing these plans. And Pamela brought together some experts who can tell you what they're doing in their various communities and states. And we had two folks from Virginia. We still have one, Bill. And I can talk to you a little bit about what we're doing here in Maryland. So I'm going to briefly introduce myself. I think the bios are online. So if you want more information, you can check the bios online. But I serve on the NAACP, the National NAACP Board of Directors. I've been involved in NAACP the NAACP for many years. And, oh, I'm so sorry, I should have turned that off. And so equity, equality, diversity, those things are in my blood. It's what I do and I've done for many years. And so currently I work with the Climate Exchange. And if you've not heard of Climate Exchange is an organization that is, it's really located, based in Massachusetts, but we're all over the country. And I head up the operations here in Maryland, Climate Exchange Maryland, or you might hear CXC Maryland. And in Maryland, what we're doing is advocating for the passage of carbon pricing legislation. To do that, I thought it was important to bring together a coalition, a very diverse coalition of not just environmental justice, not environmental and climate organizations, but people from all segments of our state, because we all have to breathe clean air. And so we have people from education, we have students involved, we have labor involved, we have faith-based organizations involved, we have civil rights organizations involved, we have business and industries, and in so many other areas. And so we built this coalition of over about 70 organizations now, representing over 450,000 individual members. And we're advocating for legislation that will charge the polluters for the damage they've done in this state. Damage that they've known about since the 1970s, and really have done very little to correct. Take the revenue from the fee that we will charge the polluters and put that back into the community. And we're going to do it two ways. There will be two buckets of money. One will go directly to the communities that have been affected the most by climate change, and into low and moderate income households, which means it goes into the pocketbooks of those that have been affected. And I'm going to say this because we don't talk about it enough, and I do a lot lately, is that women had most of those households. So women are affected most by climate change, more than men, and not just that they're ahead of the households, the children, the environment that they live in, but their own bodies. They suffer from high emissions. And so it is so important that we bring women to the table. I am a member of the board of directors for MLAW, Maryland Legislative Agenda for Women. And for the first time ever, they selected as one of their priority legislations this particular bill, because we talked about it and did our research, and we realized that women will benefit the most because they suffer the most from climate change. And so the money will go half of the revenue, and we predict almost $2 billion a year once it is fully implemented, almost $2 billion, $1.8 billion. In 10 years, we're looking at about $18 billion once it's fully implemented. So say, just average number, we'll say $1 billion a year will go into those households. Now it's going to do two things. It's going to give them a hands up. They've suffered for so long. But in addition to that, if for some reason the fee is passed down to the consumers, we don't want those individuals to pay. So the benefits fund is going to compensate for that. But in addition to that, we went to the Attorney General and said, would it not be illegal for us to put in this legislation a no pass-through provision that says these companies cannot pass down the fee to the end user? They must come to the AG's office whenever they want a fee increase and prove that it is not the result of the fee that they have been charged with this policy. So that's half of it. The other half, and I know Bill will talk about a lot of that as well, is going to go to all of the counties throughout the state to improve living situation, living conditions, to prepare for the effects of climate change, but to address the issues that have climate high emissions have caused in our state. Okay, the sea level rise, the medical issues we have. We have so many children and adults suffering from asthma. We have flooding all over, not just, you heard about Ellicott City once in 100 years, happened a couple of years in a row almost. But the flooding is happening everywhere. And so there will be money in that, from that policy to help fund those things. But half of it, taken in consideration the Justice 40. Have you guys heard of Justice 40, right? We beefed it up to 50%. So 50% of that infrastructure fund will go back into those same communities that have been affected the most. Communities where if we say all schools in the states have to have solar panels, there are going to be communities where it's not really affordable, right? Homes, you need to put solar panels on your homes. There will be communities where individuals will not be able to afford to put solar panels on their home. There will be funds in this legislation, in this policy, that will be able to fund those improvements. So basically, that is what this legislation does. It will be introduced in January during the legislative session. Look out for it. I'll leave my card here if you want to hear more about it. If you want to join this coalition that is growing, you're welcome to do that. Now, with that, my tablet went off. With that, I'm going to move on to introduce Bill and let Bill talk about what he would like to share with us. And I'm just going to do a brief introduction. Because once you want to stay at the podium? There. Okay, as you come to the podium, I'll do a brief introduction because once again, you should have his bio, online. Bill is the Chief Executive Officer of Community Resilience Consulting. It's the small business headquartered in Lynchburg, Virginia. For more than 20 years, he has supported communities and projects around the world with hazard and climate change risk assessments. Sorry. Including over 60 hazard mitigation plans in the United States. He supported the development of the Community Resilience Course for the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, the Coastal Climate Change Adaptation Course for NOAA, Coastal Service Center, and was the author of the World Bank's Community Reconstruction Handbook. Recently, he was a lead author on the Albemarle County Climate Vulnerability Assessment Report and provided technical support for Lynchburg's Environmental Justice Project, Lynchburg Rising. He currently supports FEMA headquarters with testing and technical support for their risk assessment software hazards. Bill has an undergraduate degree from Virginia Tech in aerospace and ocean engineering, and a graduate degree in geographic and cartographic science.
Great. That's a mouthful.
Bill.
Great. Thanks so much. And unfortunately, Leslie King couldn't make it. She was ill. But I'm going to attempt to go through all our material today. But I appreciate you all making the time to hear about our project. This is Lynchburg Rising. So this is what we call our environmental justice project in Lynchburg, Virginia. So a little bit about the project background. This was EPA funded. So they have what they call the small grants. And we were awarded that small grant. We were the only ones in Virginia to get the award that year. And it's basically was a 14-month project which finished up this year. And what EPA has done is they've integrated resilience into the grant. So looking at environmental justice communities, as well as kind of building that resilience in there as well. So looking at things like flooding and heat island effect and that sort of things that are going to be exacerbated by climate change. And I'm on the board of directors for Resilient Virginia. So they were the nonprofit that pursued this environmental justice grant. This came about, we actually created a Lynchburg Resilience Group. So we got together with universities there, the city, some nonprofits, some community citizens who are really into climate change impacts and resiliency. And we built this group about 6 years ago, so it was before COVID. And we met about 4 times a year to talk about how we might be able to make change in the community. And this grant opportunity came around, and we decided to pursue it. The city was happy to be a partner, but they did not want to administer a grant. But they said, hey, we'll provide all sorts of support if you all will administer it as a nonprofit. So we decided to do that. And we already had a group together who had been working together for several years. So I think that really helped us when we were telling the story in our grant application. We kind of knew what everyone's role was going to be. We knew how we were going to work together and do this project. So I think that helped quite a lot when we were applying. So just a little background. Some of you might not know where the city is. It's kind of in the southwest, not quite as far as Roanoke, but kind of south of Charlottesville, north of Danville, southwest of Richmond. We are on the James River, so you can see the James River there. Lynchburg used to be called the Pittsburgh of the South because we have basically a big river and then a bunch of elevation right at that river. So we're also called the Hill City because there's so many hills that you can kind of see there. But all this, of course, causes flood issues and stormwater issues because it's all built up, and we've got a lot of impervious surfaces that take the water and just send it downhill. So a little bit about the demographics. We are about the 5th largest kind of population center in the state. The city itself has about 80,000 folks in it. Demographics are there as well. So our Black population is about 30% of the city. Our poverty rate, though, is quite high. It's almost 17%, which is, the state of Virginia has about a 9.9%. So it's much higher than the state average. And the other concerning stat here is 23% of children live in poverty right now in the city. So that's also quite high. So these are some of the statistics we brought to EPA's through the application process. We brought to their attention. There's also been several issues over the last, say, 10 years in terms of hazards. We do have a CSX train line that goes through several of our neighborhoods. We had a crude oil spill back in 2014 into the James River, which is also our water supply. So we had that. The train track runs right along the river, and that river goes to Scottsville, to Richmond, and then all the way through the state of Virginia. So everything that happens in our city impacts a lot of the state. We also had a dam breach in 2018. So some of you might have heard of that as well. So 17 feet of water in 7 minutes. It's quite a lot. We have 5 high hazard dams in the city. And when those breach, they can cause casualties. They can destroy businesses, homes. And that was one of the things we looked at as well through this process, because a lot of people don't know, if you're hit with a dam breach, you have to have flood insurance. Your regular insurance does not cover you. And a lot of people are renters. The people who lived in the dam breach kind of inundation area were unaware that they were not covered. They had substantial damage to their businesses, which they were not covered for. If they had flood insurance, which they could have got at a very cheap rate because they are not in the 100-year floodplain, they could have been covered by insurance. So it's one of the things we're trying to do as well, is kind of educate folks on, what could be done. A lot of people don't know this sort of stuff, unless you're in some sort of the insurance industry or, happen to sell this for a living. This is one thing, renters aren't necessarily told when they're in a floodplain or if they're in a dam breach inundation area. The landlord isn't required by law to tell them in Virginia. So that can be an issue. We also have very low life expectancy in many neighborhoods. So you'll see the red areas there on the maps. This is from the EJ screen the EPA provides. Those red areas are lowest 5% in the country, okay, in Lynchburg. Okay, so we have several neighborhoods in the city itself that have extremely low life expectancy. So part of it, we're also trying to figure out, what's causing some of this. The screen also has things on cancer rates and all sorts of, COPD and asthma and all sorts of things. So we're trying to figure out kind of what is causing these issues as well. Because obviously it's very interesting that it's very red and then it jumps to almost nothing. It's kind of concerning in some of those neighborhoods. And we have had industry in those neighborhoods for many years, and some of them are no longer there, but we have an elementary school that was built on a landfill, and we have several, we have a brownfield site there. So there's several environmental issues going on there as well. We have about a dozen industrial facilities that still house hazardous materials on site. And 3 of those facilities are in the James River floodplain. We also have redlining in Lynchburg, and you can kind of see there, and yes, those red and yellows match up with the low life expectancies as well. So when you start to bring these things together, you start to see, okay, as redlining, we'll look at some maps here in a minute that look at heat island effects. Those are direct matches. So decisions that were made decades ago about how to provide trees to our communities are still impacting us today with our higher temperature rates in these areas that were historically redlined. So like I mentioned, we did have a really good Lynchburg Rising team. We had a couple of nonprofits. Resilient Virginia was the administrator. We have the Jubilee Center, which focuses on education for use. We have several city departments, and within these departments, like Water Resources, Parks and Rec, we have kind of a champion in that city department, and they were included in the grant application as well. So again, this is the city that they didn't want to administer it, but they were able to provide us with expertise and with some folks who wanted to make changes. We have several colleges. Lynchburg is obviously known for Liberty University, I think, mostly, but there are 4 other universities there. Randolph College, University of Lynchburg, Sweet Park College is there as well. We also have Virginia University, which is our historically Black college, is downtown. We have our Planning District Commission, which does our mitigation planning. So in the state of Virginia, mitigation planning is done by planning district, which is different than Maryland, which is done at the county level. So we do have those folks involved as well. We had a couple of private sector for some of the community engagement. And then we also have neighborhood ambassadors. So we had, within our vulnerable neighborhoods, we have these ambassadors who helped us arrange neighborhood meetings, helped us figure out who to invite and when best to invite folks. So we had that as part of our team as well. And so we're trying to build towards this kind of climate equity plan. This first initial, small grant helped us kind of start getting there. So this is just an example of kind of what we want to get to. This climate equity plan that has these, these assessments, community engagement, and then also going beyond pointing out the issues into fixing some of those issues with climate mitigation and adaptation. Putting that into our policy and regulations, and then doing education and outreach as well. So the part that we did was looking at some of this climate risk analysis, and then also doing some of the engagement as well. So we did our climate risk analysis, which I'll talk about here in just a minute, to identify those most at-risk neighborhoods. And then we were able to kind of drill down into those 4 neighborhoods we identified and figure out what was going on in those neighborhoods. We identified champions in those neighborhoods, and a lot of our communications and engagement strategies were focused on those 4 neighborhoods. So the next step we did basically some neighborhood meetings and listening sessions, and then also taking that information that we learned and trying to find some solutions and document them as well to make sure that the city understood what was going on too. So some of the data analysis, like I said, we're looking at extreme heat, flooding. That's both from the James River and its tributaries, but also stormwater as well as a major issue there because of all the concrete and asphalt. And then we looked at several of the population indicators. So we looked at EJ Screen, Justice 40, Places, which is the CDC data that looks at health. We looked at some of the risk index from FEMA. We looked at some of the EJ tools that the states have developed, like in Maryland, North Carolina, Colorado, California, Washington. So we looked at all the different indicators that they were looking at. And that's how we decided to select the ones we did, which I'll show you here in just a minute. And we got that information from the census data, the American Community Survey data, the decennial data that came out in 2020. And we decided to create these different indicators. So we did a poverty indicator, we did a household indicator, health indicator, and a building indicator. So I'll show you what those look like. So this is the indicators we decided to identify. And so we use these indicators to figure out which of our neighborhoods were most vulnerable. So you can kind of see we have one for poverty there. We have several different indicators for those. Anything from household income to crowding, more people in rooms, no vehicle access, housing costs 30% or more of the income. Then we also have household indicators getting to age, ethnicity, race, single parent household without diploma, English-speaking households, renters versus homeowners, and then health. We got this from the CDC. And then we also had actually local parcel data that we had. So we had information on our buildings, so the condition of the buildings themselves, and then also things like the year built of those buildings, whether it was manufactured housing, multifamily housing. So we had that indicator as well. Okay, so we brought all these things together. This was our hazard information. So that top map there shows the heat island effect. And what we did, the universities worked together to, we went and attached basically these advanced thermometers to our vehicles, and we all drove around the city in the morning, and then in the afternoon, and then in the evening to collect all this data on the temperatures of the city. So this is something that Richmond had done several years back, but several other cities in the state have done now in the last couple of years. So we collected that heat data and we mapped it all out so we can see kind of where the impacts are. And again, if you compare this to our redlined areas, you'll see the reds match up. We also had in the southeast there, that is actually Liberty University. When they developed their university, they just cut all the trees down. So again, we've got one area there that's, you can see, when it transitions from forested area parks to, everything's clear cut and you've got a bunch of parking lots and not a lot of growth there. You end up with a lot of heat there. And those folks are paying more for air conditioning and that sort of thing. And then the bottom there, that's our flood information. So this is not just our floodplains, but also stormwater flooding too that we experience. Okay, so to calculate the vulnerability, we took all those indicators I mentioned and we combined them with that heat island data and the flood data, and we got to this kind of final heat map that shows what all those things combined looks like. And so from that information, we decided to make the population data worth about 40%, and then the hazard information was worth about 40%. I'm sorry, the population data was 60%, and the hazard data was 40%. And within that 40% of hazard data, 20% was flood, 20% was heat island effect. And so we kind of tweaked these numbers too to see how they would influence this final heat map. And really, we were coming up with kind of the same top 4 neighborhoods. No matter whether we made poverty higher than household or they were all worth the same, we were kind of getting to that final result of these 4 neighborhoods that we wanted to address. So that's how we identified the neighborhoods and move forward with community engagement. With this, so once we knew the neighborhoods, it allowed us to kind of strategize about how we are going to engage these communities, because they each have different events going on. They have neighborhood events. One of them had a Juneteenth event that we went to, and we would go with a little table and just kind of talk about the project. And when people came to our table, we actually had something printed out ahead of time for each of the 4 neighborhoods. So if they said they were from Diamond Hill neighborhood, we could just give them that directly and say, this is what we're thinking about doing. This is the project. This is how it's impacting you, to get some of the folks to join some of our neighborhood meetings. And we also identified neighborhood ambassadors. We had one ambassador for each neighborhood who was kind of considered a community leader who was really interested in the project. And they really helped us kind of figure out kind of the venue to use, how to go about communicating to everyone. In some of these neighborhoods, there's only like one grocery store. So we go to the grocery store, put up some flyers, to let folks know. And actually one of the grocery stores was super excited about it and actually went and talked to people about it as they were coming in. So it's kind of interesting to see, how people would, I think when it was really focused on the neighborhood itself, people started to take more interest than just like a Virginia-wide thing or a Lynchburg-wide thing. And besides the neighborhood meetings, we also plan to have a environmental justice conference at the end that the University of Lynchburg was going to host. So that we had that earlier this year. And that was where we brought all that information together, and we brought everyone back together in the neighborhoods, and we had kind of a debrief and talked about next steps. I'll get to that in just a minute. So the neighborhood meetings, we provided some community maps. A lot of folks like to talk about their communities, and they're looking at a map. Those maps had things like the heat island data that we showed, so they could see, if their house was in one of those red areas, it was certainly going to be impacted from the heat that they're seeing. And same with flooding too. And this allowed us to also pinpoint things. We gave them little stickers, and they could say, hey, my house floods every time it rains. Water comes straight down the hill through my house. And they also talked about, what they did. They actually came out, they took a piece of wood and they diverted the water so it didn't go straight through the front door. So we were able to kind of pinpoint these areas, and the city found this really great because they didn't have any of this data. They didn't go out during the storm events and see where the issues were in these neighborhoods. And if we could pinpoint exactly where the issues were, then they could start moving on them. So a lot of this was listening to what the participants were telling us, and also kind of connecting the dots. We didn't come in and say, what are the climate issues? Because no one knows what a climate issue is. It's a very vague thing that they hear about, but they do know what tree topping is. And so, when they're like, well, the power company came in, they topped our trees, and our bench to sit for the bus is under those trees. So now we have no shade. So all these things are just, they're all connected. And so, to document that and look and take pictures and say, okay, obviously the contractor came through here. If this were to happen in a wealthier neighborhood, city council would have been told that very day that there is tree topping going on and that's unacceptable. But we were able to document this and provide it to the city, and also provide it to the power company, who was arguing that didn't happen. So we talked to folks. Also, the cost to cool the homes was a big issue. All these costs are going up over the last several years. So we're trying to get folks to understand, that these are the issues that are tied to climate in some way. These are just some of the things that we heard through some of these neighborhood meetings. I talked about the topping the trees, the stormwater issues. There were a lot of issues with people calling the city and the city doing nothing, and they call again and the city still didn't do anything. So we had one person from the city in every neighborhood meeting. We told them just sit tight and listen. and they, they were writing notes. And at the end, well, I'll get to that in just a minute, but we talked about, some of the stormwater issues, electricity costs going up, a lot of the trash, vegetation debris. We had a large storm event last year. Like I said, we have one food lion that provides food for basically the whole neighborhood. That without that food lion, it's a food desert. And what happened was it's built in a bowl, and so it's not the greatest location. And they have a massive stormwater catch basin there that takes the water out. And as soon as it rained, all of the debris and trash came and just clogged everything up. And so the waters rose and the food line was flooded. And so that food line was out of commission for a couple of days while they went in and actually had to clean up the debris and the mud and everything from the store itself. So things like that, where you've got a lot of trash and debris and it's not being maintained, that comes back to haunt you. There were a lot of power outages as well that we heard from. They want more engagement with city representatives. They feel the city representatives really target the wealthier neighborhoods and not the neighborhoods that need it more. And they also want more neighborhood meetings where they can come together and talk about these issues and how to fix things. So there's a couple of things that came out of this. I'm not sure how much time I have. I think I was the only speaker. So, but I think one thing that the city actually brought up, which I thought was interesting. Like I mentioned, we had one person in the water resources who's really a champion. And she said she wants to start putting an equity lens on stormwater projects. So when projects get funded, right now there's nothing that says like vulnerable communities should get that funding first. And that's what she wants to do, is to put that out there. These communities are already vulnerable for a host of different reasons. we should be prioritizing stormwater projects there first, and then and some of the other neighborhoods later. So I thought that was pretty interesting. We'll see if the rest of her department says it's good to go, but we did document that, and we really want to push forward with something like that. I don't know, there might be other communities that do something like that, but I thought it was pretty neat that they had brought that up on their own, and after listening to all these neighborhood meetings. The nuisance flooding needs to be reported and prioritized. We talked about developing an app for the city so that a resident could just take a picture on their phone and send it in and say, this is, DC has something like this. There's a lot of communities that have this, but we don't. We don't have a lot of these technology apps and that sort of thing yet. And then we also, the larger projects that we had, we're adding to the hazard mitigation plan for the city to potentially be funded by FEMA down the road. So we do have sort of a living mitigation plan. It is online. A citizen or anyone can just go onto it and make an addition. So what we did was we went on and made additions for some of the larger projects that would need federal funding. We have like our wastewater treatment plant is in the floodplain, and if we had a large flood, that would contaminate 2 of these neighborhoods. So there are several things like that where we think that if they had the money, they could move forward with some of this mitigation. Then also working to educate the power company contractors on appropriate. We do have an urban forester now who works for the city, so bringing him into this mix and seeing what we can do with some of the forestry. And then we're also some of the universities are kind of doing their own things now as well. They were also, like I said, partners, and they actually we had each university provide an intern for the project, so they were able to work with the neighborhood meetings, and they were all excited about doing kind of other projects that build on to kind of what we heard as well. So I know there's a couple of like food forests that are being developed now for some of these neighborhoods, which I thought was pretty neat. And then also trying to do more engagement in meetings. And then we're also, obviously, we're going to apply for kind of a next round of funding to see if we can move forward on some of these issues that we identified here. But I think that was kind of it from the project, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Let me do this, Bill. Thank
Okay.
you,
Yeah.
first of all. And if you don't mind, if you send that presentation to Pamela, we'll get it out to our guests, those who signed up. Molly, if you want to sign the sign-in sheet, we'll do that. But what I'd like to do, since there's just a few of us, I would like for you to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little about you, if you work on any of these plans, or what you do in this phase. And if you have questions for Bill or myself, please at that point, you can ask questions. So, and we do have a microphone if you would like to. Molly, we'll start with you.
Yes, I'll start, but I don't know if my questions are ready, but I'll try it.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Molly. I'm currently a master's student at University of Maryland, Baltimore County in geography and environmental systems. But in previous career moments, I've been a GIS specialist doing a lot of work in environmental or analysis around environmental issues. And I guess I'm interested in being here because I'm really interested in community engagement around this sort of planning efforts and how to make it more engaging, because these are very long-term plan things, and it can be hard to gather momentum around that, especially if different neighborhoods have felt left out in the past by these efforts. So I guess I kind of had a question written down for you, Bill, around like, it sounds like you've done a lot of work around doing larger scale project planning And if you wanted to highlight anything about this process that you thought really like stood out to get people showing up and feeling involved in that, there was both like maybe a short-term thing that they could see changing for them, because these climate plans are like, you start the planning process and then you get a project process, and then so if you want to speak to that a little bit more.
Sure, yeah. And I've been involved with planning for quite a while, about over 20 years now. And it seems, 10 years ago, during these processes, you'd basically have the same dozen people show up to every single meeting. They're usually retired, wealthy, and they always had, something to say, but that was the only voice you heard, right? And I think a lot of times going through, like a hazard mitigation plan or a climate resilience plan, sometimes like on the mitigation side, you're basically checking a box for FEMA. You're saying, hey, I posted something on social media to get people out here, and they showed or they didn't show, and that's about it. This was a really different process, I felt. Unfortunately, Leslie's not here. She was really our engagement specialist, but so we decided to do things really different and make that more of a focus than I think it traditionally has in other planning activities. So, I think one thing we did was we talked to folks kind of ahead of time to see what schedules look like. Does it make sense to have something at lunchtime on Saturday or Thursday after dinner? Can we arrange childcare? So we did childcare. We did food, so either dinner or lunch. We paid people to show up. My time is worth money. Their time is worth money. They're providing input, so we're giving them a gift card. We're giving them food, childcare. So we're trying to lower the barriers for them to participate in this process. So I think, that having that neighborhood ambassador who kind of knew folks, they're like, these people always complain about this and this, and these folks, they want to see change here. So having them kind of know the neighborhood and the folks in it, the churches in it. One of the churches provided us a venue, making sure people could walk to that venue. Like I said, Lynchburg is a hilly city. It's not easy to get around. A lot of folks don't have vehicles. So, identifying that venue, making sure we could get the most people there at a certain time. And we would get 30 to 40 people in a neighborhood meeting, which I think is a good number. It wasn't, I've been in mitigation meetings where we have like 5 people show up, and we have a room like this, and it's like, but, and we had high schoolers show up too. I was reminded earlier today when the kids talked about their project at lunchtime, sometimes those kids were the first ones to speak when we would ask them about some of the issues. And once they started speaking, the parents were like, started going as well. So it kind of broke the ice a little bit. So it was good to see actually some of those high schoolers show up who might have been dragged there by their parents, but who actually participated and provided really great input. So anyway, I think those are kind of our things we did to get more engagement.
Let me just say real quick. Bill did, some of the things he discussed are very important. And the one thing that sticks out to me, especially when you're looking at various communities, bringing them in, especially those communities affected the most, is the faith-based organizations can be a big resource. And I'm glad to hear that you did take advantage of that. But the other side of it is you have to look at what's important to them. Because oftentimes when you say you want to have a meeting about mitigations, about resiliency, they're not thinking, even though it's affecting them, they're not thinking about it at that level. And so you just have to go to where they are. You really have to go to where they are. You have to know your communities. And so therefore there's certain communities I can't just go in and expect them to listen to me or to even want to come to hear what I have to say. But if I have someone they respect in that community to invite them, then there's a better chance they will show. So all of those things are just, great tools that we can use to keep people and bring people, get them involved before decisions are made, before the plan is completed. We want to get input.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. My name is Asada Rashidi. I'm the Environmental Justice Organizer for South Ward Environmental Alliance in Newark, New Jersey. I also sit as the chair of the Environmental Justice Committee for the NAACP in Newark. Very new to that role, actually. But it was just great hearing your climate action plan and hearing how you engage the community. I heard a lot of similarities of what we do, eliminating the barriers to make sure we can engage with the community at a level that they can come in and hear about what we're doing, but also addressing their concerns, know what they need first. And so it's like a balance. So I help you, you help me, and then we can all work together. Just hearing that was great. And I know we're going to try and work towards creating a climate action plan in Newark as well. So that's why it was very important for me to come sit and here in this session, listen to what you guys have done so far to see how we can start to move in that direction as well in Newark, New Jersey.
I used to live in New Jersey, in Somerset, New Jersey, for many years, and still have family there. So I love it when I hear folks participating from New Jersey.
I love to see the younger generation taking hold. And when you talk about the NAACP, I am from Pennsylvania, president of the NAACP in my hometown, the Lycoming Tri-County NAACP. But Lycoming County Tri-County. So we're a 3-county organization. We're kind of revamping. But one of the positions I noticed is not filled and has not been filled for a very, very long time with the state chapter is the environmental position. And so, I have reached out and reached out and reached out. And I know that Pennsylvania is reorganizing, but that's something that I need to be involved with moving forward. Okay, so my name is Emily Gale. I am the Director of Civic Engagement for Penn Future. We are a state-based organization that focuses on more policy and legal action when it comes to environmental issues. But my job has been to cross the barrier and bring environmental justice and climate action into Penn Future and actually Conservation Voters of PA, which is a C4 organization. A lot of times marginalized communities are left out of any kind of decision-making process. So we're there to, I say, to teach the organization prior to being out in the community to build the trust of the organization and the community. And I really appreciated, Bill, your presentation, which proves that it can be done. I think that something that's lacking in our organization is trying to find that niche. There are a lot of environmental organizations out in our community. We are someone that can add value to organizations already doing the work. And we have the researchers, we have the lawyers, we have the policy experts on the Hill. So how are we able to make that niche? One of the questions I do have for you is, you said that this project is over. You are trying to think of next steps. My concern is, the communities that you have been involved with, are you still involved with them and reaching out to them a lot? What's that look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I said it was over and that we're done with our funding, but I think I also mentioned that a lot of things kind of came out of this project. I talked about the universities. Each university now has several projects also going on in these different neighborhoods. So I think in a way we continue through different projects and engagement, whether the food forest I mentioned. Some of the churches are developing community gardens, and so we've got master gardeners involved now. We spoke to a lot of different groups as well when we did our communication process. I don't think I mentioned this, but we did presentations for the League of Women Voters, NAACP of Lynchburg. There are probably about 6 or 7 organizations we kind of talked to about this to get. We are like I said, we're applying for additional funding to kind of move forward with some of these other issues that may not be covered on these other projects. We are, like Chesapeake Bay Foundation has grants for water. So some of these things are kind of specific, but they all kind of came out of this original project. So I think we do have our environmental justice conference every year too, where we continue to engage the communities at the University of Lynchburg. So yeah, I don't want you to feel like we're dropping these meetings and that sort of thing. But I think they are taking on different focuses and that sort of thing. So I think if we can continue to bring in, not just this EPA EJ grant, but all these other grant programs to tackle some of these issues we've identified, because we've already kind of taken the initial step to identify the issues from the communities. So now if we can get money to kind of address some of those things, and like I said, it could be a water quality issue or a flooding issue or a heat island, planting some nicer trees in some of these neighborhoods, working with the urban forester and that sort of thing, master gardeners. I think that we can continue our engagement. Yeah.
Well, one of the other things I really appreciated, the fact that you understand that everybody's time is valuable. I constantly need to remind people that I don't believe in volunteerism anymore. My time is valuable. Anybody we have calling or doing any kind of letters to editors, their time is valuable. And especially in this day and age, when we're working with communities, most people have more than one job. So if they're dedicating their time to a project or working with you or me, those gift cards come in handy. And feeding them also comes in handy. Same with daycare. So this is recorded, right? Because I really appreciate the fact that, you believe in that. Thank you.
Yes, it is being recorded. I just would like to say, Emily, as far as the Pennsylvania State NAACP is concerned, they have challenges in leadership. I was the administrator there for a while. But we're trying to pull them together. But what I will do is the director for ECJ for the NAACP, Abray, I'll talk to her and see if she can, work with that to make sure we can identify someone at the state level to work with you guys there, because it's so important. NAACP needs to be at the table, really needs to be at the table. I have a quick question for you. And a statement as well. We talk about, we have New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland here, right? And we talk about climate action plans, and we have Virginia, excuse me. So 4 different states, and we talk about climate action plans. But does your state have a climate equity plan? Right? That's something to think about. And when they're talking about it, then, even if NAACP, if you had a good, strong chairperson for your state, that's something you could work on. And believe me, you could get grant money to help you to do that. Molly? No, because it's been recorded. Would you like to speak? Yes, come on up. You can be next.
I just had a clarifying question about the climate equity plan. So is that, or could you tell about how that plays into a climate action plan?
Yeah, well, the action plan is definitely addressing the crises. You know, what your plan is going to be. Oh, I need the mic. Sorry about that. Get carried away when I start talking about this stuff. And it's not always done with that equity lens. But if you specifically say we want a climate equity plan, then we know that equity is going to be addressed in what you do when you're planning for the future. And that really brings me to my question for Bill, is that in your climate plan for Virginia, does it include green job creation? Okay, because that is so important. We have, I don't know if you have coal plants that are closing down. I know we do, and there are people who will be losing jobs there. But more than that, when we talk about alternatives to the dirty energy, there are jobs that are being created all over. And we want to make sure that the people in the communities that we're talking about have opportunities to get those jobs, that they're properly trained for those jobs. So you have to plan for that. And so that is something that I was just wondering if you guys have thought about or talked about.
Yeah, so Resilient Virginia, the nonprofit, does focus on a lot of green jobs in the state. Right now, I probably shouldn't say this in the microphone, but we have a problem with the governor encouraging that sort of thing. Yeah, I definitely think that could be something that, like I said, Lynchburg has a lot of the industry and some of it's going away. So, this could be something to fill that gap, definitely. Yeah.
And politics plays a major role in this, a major role, and we can spend all day talking about that. But the one thing I have to say for Maryland, that at least we are encouraged with the new governor we have. He is a climate-friendly governor. We can talk to him and he gets it, and we can anticipate bills being passed without being vetoed if we come up with policies. So that's good. We didn't have that for 8 years. Would you like to?
Okay. Hey, so I wanted to ask for the climate exchange portion, did we talk about community engagement? Because my experience with climate exchange is more like a data repository. And I think that I was trying to figure out when I was looking at climate exchange, if there's some way to get a little bit more like from the data to the actual, like applying it. I was having a little bit of difficulty with that.
Okay, so Climate Exchange is the company I work for, Climate Exchange. And yes, they do a lot of data and whatever. But in Maryland, we work on policy. We are on the ground. We created, and you weren't here in the beginning when I explained what Climate Exchange does. We work on policies that's going to reduce carbon emissions in the state, and using the revenue from the fee that will be charged to the polluters to put back in the community, to uplift the communities that have been hurt the most, but to resolve a lot of the issues that we have throughout the state when it comes to resilience. And so we're on the ground here in Maryland. This is the only state in the country where Climate Exchange has an advocacy group. We have a campaign. And once we get this legislation passed, we'll look at doing, similar in other states. But right now, we're on the ground in Maryland trying to make a difference.
Well, that's awesome to know because I'm like a climate justice fellow. So I was doing the Yeah, so for my presentation, focus on New York City. And so a lot of it was looking at existing data and then connecting it to trying to find out if there's policies out there for like renewable distributed energy. And so I identified 2 programs for solar, community solar, and then also residential solar financing, so like affordable loans and also just like upfront incentives. And then another one is 6 gigawatts of energy storage by 2030. So these are programs that I analyzed for my project for energy equity. And I found that from the way I was analyzing it, they are pretty equitable programs in terms of incentivizing a variety of solutions, like not only like single family homes, like, they're also incentivizing community solar. And also the way that they're funding it, I think is in the right direction in terms of equity, because they're taking like some revenues that they get from like the other tariffs, and they're not trying to embed equity directly into rate design, but they're taking that equity component and creating programs out of it, like New York Sun, that allows for funding community solar. And also the way that they're trying to create energy storage funding mechanisms, I think, is also on the right track. So when I see all of this information, I'm trying to say, how do we get from that type of analysis to like implementation? So that's kind of where I'm going for my next step. Is I think I need to find out like, how do we bridge that? Because I think it's on the right track, but to really gain momentum for implementation, we have to go beyond just like policy analysis
Right.
and like looking at a Power BI or something. We have to.
And I agree with you 100%. The analysis, they're great, but you've got to get out there on the ground and make it happen. Let me just say this. If you go to climateexchange.org, I don't know if you've seen the dashboard.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're good.
good. And that's where you can find what all states are doing when it comes to climate policies. So that's for the rest of you. If you're doing research, we have a dashboard that we've created, and it will tell you, depending on your state or any state, what are the policies when it comes to climate environmental issues, mainly climate.
Yeah, so I'll give you a more concrete example to flow on what you're saying. Like, so for the energy storage, 6 gigawatts by 2030 in New York State, funded by NYSERDA and some like partner utilities and such, that would be in climate exchange. So I found that in terms of the scope of each state, I think that there's pretty good coverage. I think it's props to like your organization. You have staffed in a way where it pretty much has pretty good coverage, I think, for the 50 states. So for someone like me who's trying to get to implementation, is then I looked at the 6 gigawatts of energy storage roadmap, and I saw that there is like a workforce development component to it. So they have a website where there's like very open access data for project developers, and so they can go in there. But then you run into the equity issues of like, let's say, linguistic barriers. So it's like we're almost there, but it's like these last final steps that really get that funding to the appropriate parties and get the workforce development to where it should be for like an equitable transition.
Okay, good. I'm looking at the time. But thank you. Could you sign up here?
Sure.
And
Thank you.
I don't think I got you, Molly. Yeah, because what we want to do is make sure that we continue to communicate with you. Bill will make sure you get a copy of his presentation. And Pamela did want me to tell those of you who are match partners, the Mid-Atlantic Climate Action Hub, okay? If you're partners, that she's going to do a climate equity plan workshop for the hub in either October or November. So be looking for that, okay? And she apologized again for not being able to be here, but she has COVID, and it's there. It is still with us, and we just have to make sure that that we govern ourselves accordingly. Any other comments, questions? If not, thank you so much for coming to this session. I hope you got something out of it. And I have my cards here, so you can, connect with me if you like to. But also, we have your information, and we'll send out more information to you. Anything you want to add, Bill, before we end?
I believe so. My contact information is up on the screen, so if you need that, feel free to reach out.
Great. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. It's beautiful weather. I know, when I talked to Deborah, Pamela